Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio. And a quick content warning before we start this one. We are going to be talking about sexual assaults and victim blaming. So take care of yourself. Just do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And this one fits along pretty nicely alongside the one we just did about kind of a survey of what dating is like. Unfortunately, it fits along pretty nicely with it. Because we were talking about some of the concerns women still have around dating, especially in a heteronormative sense, and some of the reasons why women are hesitant. And I would say this is a big one, which is this whole victim blaming, this idea you will be blamed if something goes wrong or you will not be believed. And we have talked about victim blaming before and how toxic and insidious it is. I wanted to do a quick revisit, and this is a really quick revisit because I think we could come back to this on a very specific thing I had never heard of that I sort of stumbled on in terms of victim blaming. I found it because of the writer's strike. I've sort of returned to my creepy YouTube videos. But the creepy YouTube videos I normally watch, they are creepy, but they're much more like, I don't know, like paranormal, or sometimes like I went to that huge mountaineering phase, which I kind of revisited. So like natural disaster, maybe. I don't usually do true crime is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like there are still elements of your like maybe getting entertainment off of a tragedy that happened to someone. That can be very similar, but I don't normally do like true crime. But I wanted to find this very specific diving video because it has this infamous sign with a Grim Reaper on it. And some of you, I bet, know exactly what I'm talking about. But I was trying to find it because I knew it had been published under this one YouTube channel I follow. But a lot of times they do like, I don't know, like 5 instances of something. So it wasn't in the title. Like I couldn't find it that way. So I was like reading the comments, and which is ill-advised in any YouTube video situation.
Oh.
But through this, I found something I had never heard of, which is the rough sex murder defense, which is also called the 50 Shades of Grey defense. And all of the comments around it were so upsetting that I was like, okay, unfortunately, I'm going to have to look into this, see what it is. We need to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about some of the broad strokes of the comments at the end. But if you're like me and you've never heard of this, the rough sex murder defense is a legal defense used by some who have murdered their sexual partner, claiming it was an accident of rough sex. It's almost always a man using this defense in the case of a woman who is dead. It was first used in 1972 after an abusive husband killed his wife during what he called rough consensual sex. And he got the charge reduced from homicide to manslaughter using this. The defense grew in popularity in the 1980s in the U.S. From American jurist George Busak, quote, "The rough sex defense to the charge of murder asserts that the victim literally asked for the conduct that led to the homicide and that the homicide was the result of sexual practices to which the victim consented and may have even demanded." Using this defense often results in a lesser offense. A survey in the UK from 1972 to 2020 found that of 60 cases that used this defense, 45% resulted in a lesser sentence or punishment. And there are several specific examples you can look up. I'm not going to go into them now. A few places have tried to make this illegal or at least difficult because it's caught national attention several times where, yeah, people involved are like, you're literally saying they asked to be killed, which is the ultimate form of victim blaming. And so I did want to go over, as I mentioned, some of the comments that I saw when I was just trying to find this diving video. And a lot of it was what I presume they believe was well-intentioned advice. And it made me very, very angry because it was all of it was implying subtly, sometimes not subtly at all, that it was the woman's fault or responsibility to keep themselves safe, and or that they, usually men in this case, that you have to control your woman. Like this is whether it's a father or like a boyfriend or something like that. So in that case, I saw some that said something like, I don't let my daughter out. She thinks she's invincible, but she doesn't know the world yet. She hates me, but it's worth it. Another big one. Ladies, don't drink in public. If you drink in public, that's on you. Even non-alcoholic drinks. If a woman goes to a party and her friends don't look out for her, that's on her friends. A lot of people blaming the friends. And then ladies, I hate to say it, but if you don't take precautions, you are putting yourself in danger. Don't be stupid. So, all of this kind of putting the blame on women, and a lot of it in this case was around like, well, if she's into that, and she was asking, that's what happens sometimes. Even though a lot of times, again, I never even watched these videos. I didn't watch, but I read when I was researching this, a lot of times there was like a lot of, and what I would consider proof that the dude just choked her, like just strangled her. And instead it's being turned into, well, she's probably into that though.
Right.
Yeah. And the upsetting part is that we do live in a world, we've talked about this before, we live in a world where many of us we have precautions in place. We've talked about before at work conferences where women will have like, don't let her drink and be alone with these men or whatever, and looking out for each other. We do send pictures of guys we're meeting for first dates. We do watch our drinks, alcoholic or not. We do all of these things that when you think about are quite frankly terrifying that we have to do them, but we do them to keep ourselves safe. But the tone of these comments is much more like, it is your fault. You knew the risks, as opposed to blaming the actual perpetrator or advocating, telling men and boys like, hey, don't rape women, don't kill women, don't rape anyone, don't kill anyone.
Right. Well, and it's coming to the point that it's so hard that half the time the men will blame their own ignorance, saying that they didn't know it was rape.
Yep.
Like we talked about consent in itself, and they don't understand consent because we don't talk about it enough. But we tell women what not to do, even though they're the ones saying, I don't want to do this, obviously, but choice is taken away altogether. And so you have to be extra precautious because just saying a word or saying a no or just walking away is not proof enough to say, I didn't want this. What the are you saying to me? As well as the fact that a majority of those cases, most likely, again, it involves rape in general. So they have been violated on several times. And even when the women are alive after the fact, or the victims are alive after the fact of being raped or sexually molested, they're not believed and they're alive to defend themselves. So painting a picture of someone who has no way of voicing their side, the likelihood of them being believed is still low when they do survive incidents like that. And yeah, that's kind of the whole conversation in talking about literature like 50 Shades of Grey, and not to belittle when it comes to BDSM, but when you look at it the way that it has been publicized, versus what it is like in the actual kink community, which they are the most conscientious group of people that you will ever meet. And when you bastardize that into, again, 50 Shades of Grey, that's when the toxicity really drips in and allows for people to think this is the norm when it's absolutely untrue.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, there's so much negotiating that goes on in something like that. And like, if it's healthy and consensual, then that's great. That's fantastic. But I think a lot of times that isn't happening. And even, I mean, plenty of these, like you said, I'm pretty convinced they weren't into rough sex. It shouldn't matter if they were or not, but it's just like a lie. It's just like they're saying that.
Right.
I've talked about this too. I've run into this before where I just had a bunch of bruises and they weren't related to anything sexual. But a guy said to me like, oh, that's hot. You're into rough sex. I feel like this idea of, oh, she asked for it because she likes rough sex. Oh, she's disposable then. Like, that shouldn't be the case. You should be able to enter a sexual, you should be able to enter like any relationship and not think, oh, he might kill me.
Right. And if I remember from our BDSM episodes with the members of the BDSM kink community, they're so good at what they do, they didn't leave marks. Like, they knew how to do this professionally. Yes. So if they're leaving marks, that should be when you're questioning something. Something's not right, or something's not done correctly, or something's not done in the safety of the kink world. And that's, again, the conversation. Like, there's a difference between kink and literal violence and abuse.
Yes.
Which is being covered. Like, that man needs to be violent and abusive for him to get off. That is different.
Yes.
Absolutely wildly different from being in the kink world. And that's, again, the conversation. Of course, again, these are excuses. We know that majority of these cases had nothing to do with consensual sex to begin with, had nothing to do with love, had nothing to do with relationships. It had everything to do with he wanted to take her life and control her, and he was an abusive person. Who probably has always been an abusive, controlling person. But the narrative, the fictional narrative, which we see in like common things. I told you, like, I'm thinking of a True Blood episode, like one of the first ones, in which one of the main characters pretends to die during their quote unquote rough sex scene, and he gets caught, and then she actually does die. Whole thing. If you see True Blood, you'll know. But like that type of thing where you think you could accidentally kill somebody because you're over the top. I think you're more aware than you think. That's not maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm like very good at being aware of my like sexual experiences. I don't know. Yeah. That I'm like, there's never been a moment where I'm like, I'm in danger, or I'm endangering somehow, or I might hurt somebody doing this.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the key things is, one, like, as we did in those kink episodes, it's not always sexual at all. And it's very like you're checking in, because something can go wrong. Somebody can get hurt. But this, like I said, most often it involves strangling. And somebody pointed out, like, to kill someone via strangling is not easy. And it takes like 5+ minutes. Like, you're not accidentally, outside of maybe some freak cases, you're not accidentally strangling anybody.
Right. And the partner, unless they're unconscious, they will fight. Like, inevitably, it's an instinct. Like, your body fights, whether you're doing it or not, whether you're reacting or not, they often fight and struggle.
Right.
That's, like, we're going into, like, minute details on this and, like, talking about specifics as if, like, we're on a case ourselves. But the level of victim blaming to go to this point, the level of stupidity that it takes for people to write this as if they're doing something, they're being a hero, which is the other part of that. They really think they're doing something. Yeah. I'm gonna protect you by telling you you're a slut if you do this, or you're asking for it if you do this. Like, you are really the reason we say all men. Like, your good intentions here is exactly why we're like, yeah, even the good ones who are like, I'm protecting you. Right. You. No, you're not. Right.
Exactly. And that's going back to what we just talked about in the dating one, when a lot of men are so frustrated, feel like they can't like find someone. Here you go. Like, this is what we have in the back of our head could happen, and people would believe it. Like, this was a literal defense that is used, and people believe it. They get lesser sentences.
Like, even if the intention was from the man to kill that woman, it's still that woman's fault for being with him.
Exactly.
For being around him.
And this is like I said, this is how insidious victim blaming is. And I was thinking about this because we did do our audiobook, and I did have a really emotional thing in there about when I was sexually assaulted in college. And I was thinking about it because the whole chapter is about rape kits. And I realized I didn't write about it, but I realized I never, ever, not once, thought I should maybe get a rape kit. I never thought I should report it, because I just assumed like no one's going to believe it. I was drinking. I had one drink. I was drinking. I went out. I was in a miniskirt. I knew the risk. And the sad thing is, I mean, there's a lot of sad things. I was there to watch another friend to make sure nothing happened to her. I hadn't even wanted to go. But that's how insidious this is. It never occurred to me. Not once. Not once. So, ugh, we got a lot of work to do about this, to dismantle this. And I'm sure we'll come back, because I ran into this and was like, I'm sure there's a lot of research I could do. I do want to come back and revisit sort of the like marital rape situation, because we had a section about that in the book too. And I was like, I'm curious if this has changed since we wrote it, because it's been like a while since we wrote it.
Well, I wonder how it's backtracked, because we now know that many of the Republicans who are like, stop grooming my children, are cool with putting that back child marriage.
Yep.
And they're putting it into law today, even though it had been removed once before. So you're like, what? So with things like that, which takes away consent, essentially, like from young girls specifically, like it's geared. We know who it's geared for. Does that also mean that they're going to take that kind of? Because we know several states still have it banned.
I know.
Rape in marriage, saying that that's legal.
Yep. Yeah. So I feel like we need to come back and do a bigger survey on that when we're not trying to take time off and go on vacation. But we will.
Once every 3 years. Yeah.
I did find the diving video, by the way.
Oh, good. I'm glad you found that at the end.
I learned all of this in the process.
That was the price to pay to find that video.
The price I paid, but now I know. Now I know about the mystery of polar vortex in Florida.
There you go.
Anyway, thanks as always for listening, listeners. I know this wasn't an easy one. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at Momstuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We also have a TeePublic store. We have a book, yes, that you can pre-order at stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com and on Audible. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.